Welcome back to the Compassionate Capitalist Show. Thank you so much for tuning in today. I am excited about my guest. This is my second time I've had the opportunity to interview Miss Dar'shun Kendrick. She is just a powerhouse when it comes to so much within the Atlanta market and beyond with her firm, Kendrick Advisory and Advocacy Group, KAAG. In Georgia. So it's I'm going to tell you about her exactly and why I'm excited, but let me first set the stage for what you're going to learn about today, because this is something that we just don't cover enough. We're going to talk about the Invest Georgia Exemption and REG CF, and specifically how companies can use that to get access to capital that they normally wouldn't think about, that might be around the corner or within their specific interest group of potential customers and investors. And then we're going to talk about the flip side of that, of how investors can take advantage of similar programs and be the ones that participate in the wealth that those entrepreneurs are creating by being an investor and sharing in the financial aspect of what that company is doing. And then we're going to roll into specifically what is happening within the trends in that area to help bridge the capital gap and the wealth gap for people of color and women entrepreneurs and investors, because they historically have been a minority on both sides of that table. So let me tell you about Dar'shun. So her firm, again, is the Kendrick Advisory and Advocacy Group. She helps companies raising investor capital, is focused on growing their company by leaving the regulation to all of the stuff that they're doing. And you'll understand that more in just a second, because not only does she have her law degree and her MBA, but she also has her securities license. So she knows the full spectrum of all of that when it comes to entrepreneurs and the investors that are choosing the solid investments to participate in. Her firm has helped companies nationwide raise capital of over $1 billion in private investment from private investors, and has saved companies millions in unnecessary fees and costs. She works specifically and especially with Black and women founders to meet their unique capital raising challenges and their needs, which again, we said we'll be talking about that. Also, I wanted you to let you know there's other things that you just don't really understand if you don't know Dar'shun, if you're not from the Georgia market. But she is she's considered an innovator and a community activist. She's been featured in Huffington Post as one of 25 people positioned to scale Atlanta's growing inclusive technology startup ecosystem for Black Americans and beyond. Her service extends beyond her day job, since for many years now, I'm not going to tell her age, but for a while, since she was a youngin', she has served as a member of the Georgia House of Representatives. She represents over 54,000 Georgians in DeKalb and Gwinnett County. She also founded Georgia's first technology and innovation entrepreneurship caucus here in the state of Georgia, which is a bipartisan caucus of Georgia legislators and stakeholders committed to the mission of supporting entrepreneurs within the state. She was awarded the Urban League of Greater Atlanta Young Leader Award, and named an awardee for the Atlanta Business Chronicle 40 Under 40 Awards in 2019. I think that's the last time I actually saw her in person. So, wow. Thank you for being on my guest on my show again, Dar'shun. I'm really excited to talk about your core business. Last time we talked about the legislative side of the cannabis industry and where we are with the approval of hemp at a federal level. That was a few years back. And so now we're going to get into what's near and dear to my heart, helping entrepreneurs succeed in bringing innovation to market, and those investors that invest in them to create wealth for all those involved, grow our local economy with the jobs that they create and all of that. And we are so aligned in that. So again, thank you for being on the show, on the Compassionate Capital Show.
Thank you. It's good to see you again, even if it is virtual. Yeah. One day we'll see each other in person.
Yes, absolutely. So let me just, let's fill in the blanks, I guess, for the audience, because I kind of gave your high points, right? Talk about, your navigation. I think you have done everything with specific intent. And so when you first went and got your bachelor's in communications and political science from Oglethorpe, did you plan that down the road you were going to have all of these, certifications, degrees, and that you were going to be helping entrepreneurs and investors in the way that you do today? Was that sort of part of your path you had, or did you find something along the way that said, this is where I'm going?
So it's a mix of both. My parents are entrepreneurs, and so I grew up in an entrepreneurship household. And so I knew that I wanted to help entrepreneurs. The how, though, I didn't quite know. But then around elementary school, I got interested in the legal field. And so I said, okay, well, I will go and be a business attorney. And I've always been fascinated with people starting something from nothing, right? That's just always fascinated me, the innovation and the hard work that it takes. And so when I went to UGA Law School, I focused a lot on corporate law classes. So law school notoriously trains law students to be litigators. I knew I never wanted to see the inside of a courtroom. Put me on the phone and the internet and talking to people all day. Do not stick me inside of a courthouse. So I took some classes at the business school and got interested in the business side of it. And so that's why I got an MBA soon thereafter. But the securities part, the actual capital raising part, came sort of by a fluke. So I didn't even know this area of law existed, right? And
Really?
so I had I was trying to fill up my class for my second year of law school. And the only space I had was for this securities law class. So I read the description. I said, oh, that's interesting. So I took the securities law class, fell in love with it, and tried to track down as many classes as I could. But unfortunately, they only had one more class that they offered before I graduated. Because again, they train you to be litigators, not to be transactional lawyers in law school. And so as I got out, and then through the policy work, we get a lot of information and a lot of things that normal people don't get. I just saw the disparities in not only the wealth gap, but in capital raising between Black entrepreneurs or Black and brown or women entrepreneurs and everybody else, right?
Right.
And so I made it a personal mission and a professional mission and a political mission to make sure that I did my part to close that gap. And it's sort of, I'm very passionate, as you can see, about what I do. And so I'm always learning. I'm a lifelong learner. So that's why I have so many degrees and certifications, is because I just like learning.
Well, yeah, and it also brings it additional value to your clients and what you're trying to accomplish, and in the big picture of what it is that you're doing. So, that's bravo to that. So I want to say, let's jump in here, because as I was preparing for this, I went and visited your website. I'd been a minute since I'd been there before, and I love the newsletters that you send out. There's just has such great information in them for folks across the spectrum when it comes to entrepreneurism and any kind of economic development kinds of things. And so I went to your website and I saw this IGE. Now, and it's interesting because I knew what an Invest Georgia Exemption, but I had never, I was like, what's that acronym stand for? And by the way, folks, her website, I do want to encourage you to go there, because you will get a lot of information, and she's got some great tools there. KAAG.co. And it's the acronym for Kendrick Advisory and Advocacy Group. So please put that down. It's also in the show notes. And so one of the things that I remember when they passed the Invest Georgia exemption, we were ahead of the curve when it came to crowdfunding kinds of stuff and what had happened with the Jobs Act. Kansas and Georgia were the only ones that had been, ahead of the game, which is really pretty amazing that Georgia had done that. And we were probably 6 or 7 months before the Jobs Act got passed, and years ahead of what the SEC finally rolled out when it started with Reg A plus and eventually got to the Reg CF. So talk about, and for those folks that are listening, we're going to talk about specifically to Georgia, because that's what Dar'shun knows, has deep knowledge on. But for your own information, every state in the United States has some form of interstate exemption. They all have their own little nuances of how they operate. And some of them have had we have had some action in Georgia. Florida, for example, has had no action because of some of the weird rules they have in theirs. So every state is different. Please go to your state Secretary of State site and look up what their rules are for you as an entrepreneur that are looking to raise money in your state. But it's a great way to get your community to want to support your growth, whether you're an existing business that wants to expand or even potentially as a startup, but you've got a community of people through your university network, through your church network, through your activism network, through your chamber, whatever it is, to be able to reach out to those in your community that know you best and have them share in your success through these interstate exemptions. So with that, please describe to the audience about Georgia's interstate exemption and investor exemption, and why you like it, and what are some of the sort of the guardrails that you give to the companies that you're working with when it comes to using that.
So the Invest Georgia Exemption, or IGE, was put in place 2011, 2012, as you said, around the Jobs Act. And it allowed at the time $1 million to be raised by Georgia-based businesses. One of the most popular and most successful stories is Ground Floor, if you know of that Georgia-based company. They were able to raise 1 million and then go on to do a Reg A and raise 50 to 60 million. I think last I checked, they were still doing a raise under Reg A. But since that time, it has up to, in about 2017, it was up to 5 million. Which at the time was, again, leading all the other states, because most of the other states were still at 1 million. So to go to 5 million was huge. And it allows Georgia-based businesses to raise from other Georgia residents. Residents has a very legal meaning. And you can raise up to $5 million. Now, there are some tests and some parameters around that. You have to deposit into a Georgia-based business bank. There is an 80% test that you have to meet. But the reason I tell people this is really Georgia's best kept secret is, one, ever since 2011, if you go on the Secretary of State's website, there are only about 100 companies that have used it. And if you think of it being 10 years, that is, I mean, it really is Georgia's best kept secret. I serve on several committees and panels that the Secretary of State has had in the last few months, trying to get the word out. And I'm always preaching about it and obviously trying to tell people about it. But it is, from a compliance standpoint, it is a great option, because I advise my clients, whenever you're raising capital, there's always two tracks. One, you have to comply with federal, state, local law. So that's the compliance. The other part is the internal documents that you don't have to file, but if you're smart, you're going to get the internal documents. The compliance portion of it, using IGE, is super simple. It's a 3-page form. You fill it out, you email it in, you get confirmation, and then you're off to the races. There's no, audited financial statements like you have to have under Regulation CF for certain raises. There is no prospectus or PPM, private placement memorandum, that you have to do with normal like private offerings under Rule D. So the compliance portion of it is just super simple, meaning you save time, you save money. You still need to do the internal documents that I talked about, but the compliance portion of it really is just as simple as you can get.
Yeah, great. So when it comes to, because it's like a crowdfunding in the state, so are there restrictions? They can do a direct mail to folks. They could stand up, and once they've filled out their paperwork and they're in compliance, they could do a direct mail. They could do social media advertising. They can do any of those kinds of things.
Yeah, so they're allowed to do what's called general solicitation under the SEC rules. If you do something under another Rule D, that's not allowed, but this is allowed with this with IGE. As a matter of fact, I have a real estate syndicate. We've been using IGE since May to raise $1 million for a real estate project here over where I live and represent. So you can do general solicitation. The only catch is the people that actually invest have to be Georgia residents. So no matter who you broadcast it to, it's up to the company to do their due diligence to make sure that the person that actually invests is actually a Georgia resident.
And then what kind of restrictions are there for income level and amount of investments? I know, there's this quandary between accredited and unaccredited and caps on how much. So how does that apply within the Georgia version of that, of Interstate?
So IGE is a lot simpler than REG CF. They have such a complicated formula for how much you can invest and when you can invest. It's very simple under IGE. If you're an accredited investor, which has a very technical meaning under an SEC rule, which means you're essentially making $200,000 or more and consistently making that, and you can prove it, or you have a $1 million net worth, not including your primary residence, or, and this is new within the last couple of years, you have a professional designation. So a CFP, or like me, I have a Series 65. So if you have a Series 65, a Series 7, I believe, and a Series 63, you're automatically an accredited investor. So if you're an accredited investor, you can invest in an unlimited amount, obviously up to that 5 million cap. If you are an unaccredited investor, which means everybody else who doesn't fall in that category, the max that you can invest is $10,000 each individually. So that's another piece that you have to make sure as you are raising capital, is that you not only make sure they're a Georgia resident, but then, if they're an accredited investor, verify that so that they can, give you more than 10,000 in funds. That's what they want to do. So
there's not, because I think under Reg CF, it's 2,000 per company and 10,000 annually if you don't make the accredited investor threshold. Is it that doesn't apply in this version of Georgia's Interstate because 10,000 in a given company is authorized?
Yeah, so you can, if you're an unaccredited investor, you can invest $1 or up to $10,000. And of course, if you're accredited, then sky's the limit up to that 5 million. So it's very clear cut. Reg CF, you got to do all these calculations, and then they base it on the lesser value of your net worth and your income. And it's very complicated. IGE is very straightforward. If you're accredited, you can invest up to over 10,000 or an unlimited amount up to 5 million. If you're unaccredited, you're capped at 10,000. Very straightforward.
Yeah. Okay, great. So when it comes to a company that is, primarily Georgia based, but they have a idea that they're going to go national, or maybe they have an online presence, so they are national. Can they do the Reg CF and the Interstate at the same time?
Technically, so with IGE, you can't do it in conjunction with another raise. So the short answer is no. You can't do them simultaneously, because with IGE, you can't use it in conjunction with another raise. But I have known people who will do a Reg CF and do another raise, like a Rule 506 raise or something like that. So it's allowed under Reg CF. You can't do it under IGE either. So you're gonna have to choose which one you want.
So, but then after you've closed out say you're doing your startup round, your seed round under IGE, and within that, you set aside some use of funds to fund doing a Reg CF or some other type of capital raise, because, that's why I always like to advise companies to anticipate where their next one's going to be, and be able to roll through to that and having sufficient capital, because regardless of the way you raise capital, it is less expensive to do this way, but it does cost money to raise capital, right?
It definitely does, because you're still, again, going to have to pay an attorney to do your internal documents, right? So that only takes care of the one of two steps that I talked about to raise capital the right way, the compliance portion. You still got to do the internal documents. You're still going to have to, do the pitch deck and the marketing team and, travel expenses and all of that. It just takes care of that one thing.
Yeah. So that way, if you're working with them to advise them on their capital strategy as they, as it maps to their revenue and growth strategy, then you're helping them understand, this is for this part of it, then these are your options for the rest of your capital raise and your capital needs, if they're going to need more than 5 million, or if they're going to do it because of their valuation in smaller chunks along those lines. And then it might make sense because the type of investor is very similar under a Reg CF as it is under IGE, because you have a mix of accredited and unaccredited.
Correct. And to answer your previous question about if you could do both at the same time, so I try to caution people to be careful with that even after you've finished IGE, because there are certain time periods, usually within a 12-month time period, in which the SEC will look back 6 months and see if you raised any capital after your 12 months. So it's called integration, and there's a whole rule about it, about what constitutes integration. And essentially what that means is, if you raise, let's say you raise 3 million under IGE, and then you don't wait the required time period after you've finished, and it's within a 12-month period. So it's not when you close, it's within the 12-month time period. And say you raise another 3 million under Reg CF, what the SEC is going to do is integrate both of those holdings, both of those raises, and now you've raised 6 million. Now you've violated IGE, because the cap is 5 million, and you violated Reg CF because the cap is 5 million. So you have to be very careful about when you start a next raise.
That's a gold nugget right there, worth the 15 minutes people will have been listening to this so far, because that's the thing that people really need to understand when they're looking out and what the strategy is when it comes to raising capital. So let's turn the tables just a little bit. Let's talk about people sitting on the other side of the table, because I know that for me, the Jobs Act, opened up the door not only to remove the barrier of how entrepreneurs get access to capital, but on the flip side, it gave because the greatest way to create wealth is by being a successful entrepreneur. The greatest secret that people have known for a long time, since security laws were put in place back in the 1930s, is that the second best way to create wealth is to be an investor in those successful entrepreneurs. But that had been something that was very exclusive in these tight little niche groups for decades and decades. And it's still the reason why I wrote the book, Inside Secrets to Angel Investing, was to give potential investors a roadmap to how to get started investing in entrepreneurs. So now that you are an investment advisor, you have your securities license, you've been creating these groups and educating investors about creating wealth. How do you see investors starting to get comfortable and embrace the idea of investing in a new asset class as entrepreneurs, or how do you help them navigate that within their strategy for creating wealth?
So from the investment advisor rep side, really what I use that license for is to, one, do consultations with clients just about general financial planning and investment advice. But the second hat that I use, as you stated before, is to help companies form investor groups, sort of using crowdfunding concept in order to use economies of scale to be able to invest into businesses that otherwise they would not be able to. And what I do is do essentially a version of what we call market reports. So an investor group will say, we are looking to invest in 3 companies. Give us a comprehensive report on which one of these, not necessarily that you think is a better investment, because that is, I try not to use better investment, but I try to give them metrics and feedback based on, my licensing and my experience, so that they can compare all 3 of those companies side by side and make a decision as a group as to if this is the right way that they need to invest in this company. And it makes my securities license even more needed, because one of the differences between public and private markets, as you know, is that public markets have to answer to the Securities and Exchange Commission. So they have to do the 8Ks and 10Ks and 10Qs and all those reports that are readily available to the public. But in private companies, you don't have to do that. And so relying on an investment advisor when you're dealing with private companies that don't have to be transparent is vitally important. So I provide this service to, individual investors and also to groups that are considering, adding companies to their portfolios.
So that's a good opportunity to roll into, because most of those type of advisors that you work with are people of color and women primarily. Is that right?
Correct.
And so, one of the things that when I was preparing to do some podcasts back in 2020 during the Black Lives Matter marches, because I had been guilty, as a lot of white folk like myself have been, and particularly in the investor world, I thought everything was green. If it made money, people would invest. I never really appreciated the racial bias and the sexual bias that the majority of investors, which are white male, bring to the table. And it became I became aware of it through the course of running my own angel investor group over time, and then, dug into it. And, and I'd been a part of councils and a part of, different task groups of looking at this when I was with the Minority Business Development Center and all these different things. And so I knew that, Black and brown and women were, in single digits in some cases, barely over double digits of participation in getting access to capital, getting the capital, and on the flip side, on the investment side. So a lot of spotlight was shined on that, the systemic racism, it's 200% gap of, the average Black household is 21,000 in wealth, and it's 210,000 or something like that on, right? And there's a whole lot of history as to why that is. But at that time, a lot of corporations were saying they were going to put money to it. I had a call to action that says, if you're a venture capital fund, you can't just say you're open to investing in all types of businesses. You have to go out and seek those businesses, open your door, and put on a flashing light that says, come, apply to us. We want to look at your business. And so we saw a lot of that happening in 2020. Mm-hmm. Where is it in 2021? Do you see, is there still continuing to be some of that momentum, or has it kind of plateaued out? Are we starting to get it on track, or is there still, I know there's a lot of work to be done, but how much heavy lifting do we still need to do to get more participation of people of color and women in the entrepreneur side getting capital, as well as on the investor side of investing capital?
Yeah, it's just such a big question.
I wouldn't end with an easy question now.
Yeah, it's just so many layers to that, both as a policymaker and an attorney. To answer your question though, as you stated, when George Floyd was murdered, you had all these corporations saying, we're going to put our money where our mouth is. I think for me, the issue has always been about the metrics and being very intentional and defined as to where you're going to put your money. So just saying, as a business, we are going to, invest in minority businesses. Like, what does that investment look like? So, like some programs, when I think of capital, I think of hard cash. Like, you write me a check and I put it in the bank. But for other companies, invest has a different connotation. It means, okay, well, we're going to come up with a cute little portal where Black businesses can log in and learn classes. That's all fine.
It's good.
And good, but let's not use the word invest, right? When I think of investment, I think of hard dollars, because at the end of the day, Georgia Power is not going to accept that I have access to a portal with some classes. They need cash. And I think, it's still too early to tell maybe, but I'm always data driven. So at the end of the day, if these companies cannot produce data that shows me I invested in this number of Black-led and Black-owned businesses, this is the cold hard cash, not the investment. I'm talking about you wrote a check or cash that's in the bank, and this is the result. I think the results are still out on how far we've come. The fact they've made a commitment, unfortunately, I have to say that's a step in the right direction. But we're so behind in the wealth gap. It literally would take so much more to even equate to close the racial wealth gap. So the verdict is still out on that. Small step, but I'm still looking for some results at the end of the day.
Well, so what's interesting on that too is, like, I interviewed a few weeks back Vernon Lee of the Marathon Fund. You might have heard of it. They're an extension of the Marathon group up out of Washington, and his point was the transparency. And that a lot of them came out and said they were going to do, and to your point, it might just be that, or they're going to sponsor some kind of forum, or but it's like the cash part of it, right? And so his big call, and so part of that call on that was, like, for example, Google came out with stuff. So if you are a Google stockholder, well, just like we've held companies accountable for their economic or their environmental impact, let's hold companies accountable for what they say they're going to do, and do they really do it with any tangible means when it comes to putting real capital towards economic growth of Black and Brown owned businesses and women owned businesses. And Sig Mosley, who you know in Atlanta yourself, it was he recently became part of a fund that was focused on that, and confessed that he was not aware that there was such a challenge. He always considered himself to be green oriented, but he realized that when it came to the companies they were looking at, there was very few women and Black owned businesses at the table to be considered. So by participating in this other fund, he was able to say, we are going to throw the doors wide open and be a part of changing that paradigm. And so I think that when you have somebody that has been as entrenched in the Georgia market, as the Southeast market, as an angel investor and venture capitalist as he is, to say that this is a problem that I'm now aware of and I'm taking action, hopefully that sets the stage for others to do that. I know of a few others in Atlanta area that have shifted some of their focus, and some that are doing a really good job of it. And I really hope that there's others in others communities will, as they know of ones that are doing it well, that they will shine a spotlight on those and make people aware of it, so that it can be people can be, because they want the whole world of venture capital and venture stuff is such an I don't know, a follow on. They always seem to be like, well, we're investing in this kind of company because others have invested in that kind of company, so it must be good to invest in that kind of company, right? Like how many online pet stores did we need in the .com thing, right? But that was kind of like, where people go. And so we always have to have the mavericks that are brave and recognize that this is an untapped opportunity, because statistics have shown that founders of color and women of color outperform other, basically, let's just call it what it is, white male businesses founders. Historically, they just outperform them. So I thank you. I know you're on a tight schedule. I do appreciate you being here on the show with me again today on the Compassionate Capitalist Show. I thank you for your insights. As we begin to wrap up, anything you'd like to share that I didn't have a chance to ask you about, or you wanted, because I know you have so much you have going on. Anything you want to put your own spotlight on to draw people's attention to? I think things that are upcoming. I expect that this will go live. This week will be right before the end of the year. So anything you'd like to share?
No, I think for people that know me, know that I like sharing information. So I just encourage everybody to connect with me or my law firm on LinkedIn, because we post videos and content and articles, and really try to shine a light on ways that people can make money and be socially conscious, like they're not exclusive. And so there's always ways to get involved with some of the things that I'm doing. I'm always willing to come and speak, particularly about IGE to Georgia-based businesses. So I just invite everybody to connect with me on LinkedIn. We have an Instagram page as well, Kendrick Advisory, where we post information. So if you're interested, if the content I gave out thus far seems interesting to you and you want to learn more, do that, as well as visit my website, www.kaag.co. There is a free investor readiness assessment that's on that website. And we came up with that because we had so many people come to us that were thinking about raising capital. And we said, we have to get you prepared to raise capital. This is not something you wake up one day and say, I want to raise $1 million tomorrow.
Right.
There's some time, there's some things that you need to do. And so that assessment gives you a series of questions that you can answer, and obviously if you're ready to raise capital, then that's great. But if you're not, we follow up with you and just discuss the results of your assessment and say, hey, these are some things you need to just work on. And we partner with a lot of people and organizations and companies so that you can get ready. So if you're thinking about raising capital, give me 6 months. I always say, give me 6 months of lead time, because usually 90% of people think they're ready to raise capital, but they're not quite ready. But once you are ready, we're here to guide you so you can grow your business and leave all the regulations to us.
Great. All right. Thank you very much, Dar'shun. Appreciate you being on the show. Onwards and upwards. And please, folks, please visit KieranRands.co to sign up for our Compassionate Capitalist coffee breaks, which are tips and techniques for entrepreneurs and investors in short videos, similar to what Dar'shun does, and also how we help entrepreneurs decipher whether they should move forward with further due diligence with companies that they're looking at. So thank you again, Dar'shun. Onwards and upwards.
Thank you so much. Have a good rest of the day.